Cultural Society of Washington, D.C. I would like to thank tonight Phil Cantrino and all the management of Avalon Theatre who put this screening together for us. The Italian Cultural Society is a non-profit that promotes Italian culture and language, and we do this through cultural events, scholarship awards, and especially through our Italian language program that welcome every day students of all ages and levels in our Bethesda headquarters, we're in Fairfax, and recently also online. Tonight, in the year that Gucci celebrates 100th anniversary from its founding, we are thrilled about this movie because Gucci was one of the first fashion brands to arrive in the United States, and we are particularly proud that the movie was inspired by the book written by our friend and board member, Sara Gay Forden, who's here with us tonight.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Francesca.
So, Sara, first of all, I would like to congratulate because your book is now ranked number 2 in the New York Times bestseller list. So, yeah. So your book is very well written, very well documented, and rich in details. So we know that you lived in Milan for 22 years, and please tell us how were you able to recall all the conversations and the fights among the family, and how to describe so well the story and the fashion industry that we can read in your book.
So is that better?
Yes.
Okay, great. So it took me 2 years to write the book. I took a leave of absence from my job at the time. I was the bureau chief and the business writer for Women's Wear Daily. And I really, after covering the luxury goods industry day in and day out, I really felt like I wanted to take a deeper dive into a story. And it took me a while to realize that the story was going to be the Gucci story. And actually, that happened on a trip home to this area to visit family. We were living in Arlington, Virginia, and the Quincy Library had just opened up. And I went into the Quincy Library, and I had, like many journalists, I had been wanting to write a book for years. And I went into the Quincy Library, and they had a new computer in the research department. And the beautiful old wooden card catalog was over on the side. So I walked up to the computer and I typed in a word, Gucci, and it spit out 10 blue links, and of those 10 blue links, 8 of them were articles that I had written. And that's when the light bulb went off and I said, oh my God, I guess the book is going to be about Gucci.
That's great. And have you ever imagined that the book would have become a movie, and how does it feel to see it?
Well, it's kind of overwhelming. As a writer, you spend a lot of time alone in front of a computer, and I spent a lot of time in freezing mountain villages thinking it was going to be idyllic and trying to type out the story over a computer with a 3-year-old crying in the other room. So it wasn't always glamorous, but I always thought the story had the power of a big screen, and I wrote many of the scenes thinking about like the camera panning across, Piazza San Fedele in Milano, where Maurizio Gucci had established his first headquarters. But I never imagined it would become a production of this level, so it's really quite incredible.
And were you involved in the making of the movie?
So for many years I was not involved, and this has been a project that Ridley Scott and his company have had in production for many years. But in 2018, they told me they'd hired a new screenplay writer, a young Italian named Roberto Bentivegna, who spent much of his childhood growing up in Milano, and his mother had worked in the fashion industry. So he understood perfectly the world that my book was trying to recreate. And so we had a collaboration, and he would ask me questions about the story and the characters and the dynamics, and I thought he did a phenomenal screenplay.
And, recently I read an article in which Tom Ford wasn't sure if he was supposed to laugh at some comedic scenes that we'll see in the movie, because for him the story was quite serious. So what do you think about this aspect, this point, and about the characters in the movie?
Well, I mean, this is a tragedy. In fact, Patrizio's lawyer during the trial, which I covered in Milano for 5 months, I was in the courtroom every single day, and his name was Dedola, and he said, you know, this story makes a Greek tragedy look like a children's story. So I think, you know, Tom is right in that it's a very serious story. But, you know, Ridley Scott is a very talented director, and this is his movie, and he's done, you know, it's not a dark movie. It could have been a very dark movie, but it's a movie that has moments of comedy. That doesn't mean to undercut the tragedy of the story, but it gives you like a little bit of comic relief, I would say.
Yeah. So then he needed to put his interpretation. So, and I don't know if there are questions in the public. You are allowed. This is okay. There is a microphone there, or maybe you can speak out.
There's a microphone there.
Please.
Go to the microphone.
Yeah.
Hello, Sebastian. I just wanted to ask you, are you happy with the end result of the movie, I mean, coming from your book? Is it like a birthing of something that you imagined like that?
You know, as a writer, to see my work taken up with this level of director and cast, it's really an incredible experience. And I think that the movie has captured the thrust of the story. It's as I was telling Francesca earlier, it's a very specific slice of the story. My book goes deep into the origins of the Gucci brand and the company and the family, and it also talks about what happened with Gucci after the family was no longer involved. So I would say read the book.
Well, what was your first interaction with Gucci? I mean, as far as you can remember.
So my very first interaction was actually Maurizio Gucci's press conference in 1991 in Milan. He had just opened a fabulous new office right near La Scala, and he was talking about how he was going to turn Gucci back into, you know, top-tier luxury brand, heralding the 8 years of his father and his grandfather.
That's great. And did you have in mind, I mean, an actress or someone, I mean, as Lady Gaga, for instance, I mean, someone else that other than Lady Gaga?
I'm a big fan of Lady Gaga. I never imagined she was going to be starring in a movie playing as Patrizia.
We then had another actress as Patricia.
There have been other actresses named, attached to the project over the years, but she's the winner.
Thank you very much.
And I also wanted to say that we do still have a few copies of the book, and so if you want to purchase it, come to us, and Sara is here to sign it.
Molto volentieri.
So we still have a few minutes if somebody has a question.
First of all, congratulations. The movie seems to be just a gigantic success, and the book, so excited for you. I guess my question is, it's sort of like Sophie's Choice. Do you have a particular era of the Gucci long history of design that particularly speaks to you, or that is a favorite?
You know, I was just back in Florence in September, and I went to Via della Vigna, where the Gucci store was opened 100 years ago this year. And I went to the Gucci archive and visited, you know, got to see all the products that have been collected over the years. And I honestly say I love so many elements of the story, but I loved, for me also, because it was a learning process, writing about sort of the merchant class in Florence in those early years, even before Gucci. and describing the neighborhood, the Via delle Caldaie where they had the workshop, then the new factory in Scandici, and I just love digging into the sort of the history both of the culture and the manufacturing, but also even of the buildings, because I found the buildings had so much history and so much to say. Also Corso Venezia in Milano, and how that was kind of like the avenue of the industrial elite, which is a real backdrop to this whole story.
Yeah, the house Maurizio.
And the house that Maurizio, yeah.
Congratulations, Sarah. I wanted to ask you to tell everybody, like, what happened at the premieres? Like, what was the fun part? How was that to see, you got to see the movie finally done after all these years. How did that feel?
Oh, and the premieres were incredibly surreal. And as I was saying before, writing a book is a very solitary, daunting enterprise. And this is my friend Francesca from Milan. We know each other, and I felt like I was dragging this like big heavy cart behind me for 2 years. And then to all of a sudden be in London and this incredibly glamorous event and on the red carpet and talking about the book, I mean, it's something that not many writers even get to experience. So I felt incredibly privileged to be able to be there and to see talent like Lady Gaga, Jeremy Irons, and Adam Driver, and it was very surreal. It was like the Cinderella moment for the writer.
Yeah, I remember when you were about to go to London, and then you've been in Los Angeles, New York, but in Milan also there was already.
There was a premiere in Milan. I did not go, but Lady Gaga went with Roberto Bentivegna, so they had their red carpet moment.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, you miss Milan.
Yes. And actually, Lady Gaga went on Fabio Fazio that Sunday night.
Yes,
Che tempo
che
che
tempo
fa.
che fa, in tempo
And
che-
then that period, she was talking about how she hadn't read the book. And I'm thinking, oh. Okay, she read her process, and she talked about her process. But then she said she hadn't read the book, and she threw it away because it was all gossip. And I'm like, I don't think so. I spent 2 years reporting this book.
No, she said that she didn't want to be too influenced.
To be influenced.
Right.
But then on Fazio, she said, oh, but I hear it's a really good book. So I was like, thank you. Good.
Other question from the audience?
Do you have another book in progress?
I'm doing some research. I have another story that I would love to see become a big film, which is a Cold War story about a Polish colonel and his CIA handler. And the CIA handler was my father.
Oh my God.
So there's already a book about him, so I'm not going to write another book, but there may be a way that I can help get this going.
So it's not going to be your book, because there is already.
There's already one, but there's a Polish film producer who's working on making a remake of a Polish movie in America for a global audience. So I think it's a story that people will be interested in learning more about.
I didn't know about that.
So the Polish movie is called Jack Strong, and the book is called A Secret Life by Ben Weiser, who's a New York Times reporter. And it's an incredible story about the sort of the Soviet Empire, Poland, and the United States.
Other questions? So, I think, what do you think, so what the audience thought after the premiere that you participated?
I think that this is a story that spans 3 generations. We see, 2 of them in the movie, and I think that it's really, for me, the Gucci story is emblematic of how many family companies struggled with the whole succession issue, and it's kind of, the struggle is on steroids because there were so many twists and turns. This is a story that if you made it up, nobody would believe it because it's so extraordinary. One of my favorite scenes is when Maurizio learns from his driver, Luigi, that the financial police are coming to search his home and arrest him. And Luigi tips him off and says, go down to the garage and get your Kawasaki and run to St. Moritz, where he had a house that his father had left him. And in Switzerland, there was no extradition, so he could be safe there. So that's in the movie and it's in the book. And it's like, I mean, it's almost like a James Bond scene, right?
Yeah.
But it really happened.
Yeah. This is a.
And he ran the company from St. Moritz for over a year while he was resolving the legal issues that he had. So, yeah.
So, I'm from Wilton, Connecticut, so I'm interested in
Sherry.
Do you have a reason?
Yes, so great question. So, Sherry McLaughlin was the first girlfriend of Maurizio Gucci after he left Patrizia. And I knew about her, you know, I interviewed more than 100 people for the book, but not Sherry. She was the one person who eluded me. She didn't answer my emails, she didn't answer my phone calls. And in 2001, after I was presenting the paperback edition at the Sole bookstore in New York, and everybody was kind of getting ready to leave, I was signing the last books, and I saw a tall, blonde, beautiful blonde woman kind of hanging back. And she comes up to me at the end, and she has tears in her eyes, and she says, Sarah, I'm Sherry McLaughlin. And I'm so sorry I didn't talk to you. If I'd known you had written such a great book, I would have talked to you. So it was a real moment. But then, you know, we hugged, but I wasn't writing another book at that point, and I didn't see her again or hear from her for 20 years. And then when the first stills were kind of breaking the internet from the shooting, and there in particular there was the photo of Adam Driver and Lady Gaga on the slopes in St. Moritz, and he's wearing white ski pants. And she direct messaged me, and we started talking. And she said, Sarah, you know, I'm seeing the shots from the movie, and I can't sleep at night. I keep dreaming about Maurizio, and I know why he wore white ski pants. And she laughed, and she said, because he was a terrible skier. And she was a very good skier. He was a terrible skier, and he always wore white ski pants because if he fell down, he said nobody would notice. So we started talking, and I had the feeling that she was ready to tell her story. And I asked her if she would sit for an interview, and she said, thought about it, and she said yes. So I recently published an interview with Bloomberg Business Week, which tells the Sherry story of her. She was with him for 7 years, until 1990.
Is there a part of your book that is not in the movie and you wished it was? You are missing?
Well, I think the Sherry story would have been if I had spoken to her then, but you know, maybe it's for the next movie.
Do you think that the movie is as accurate as your book? I'm thinking the New York Times remarks about how the Gucci family was very unhappy about the movie. I trust that you stuck to the facts because you're a good researcher, but would you have made the movie more accurate in any way?
Well, you know, the book has been out for 21 years, and I never had a challenge from anybody, and I interviewed as many of the family members as I could, in particular Giorgio and Roberto, who were Maurizio's cousins. And they really helped me put together the early part of the family history and the family dinner table conversations and you know, the beginnings of the iconic products. And after the book came out, I actually sent them galleys of the book. And they told me that they felt that it was a really fair representation of the early family history.
I wasn't speaking to your work, but to the movie, what the movie made of you.
Yeah. I mean, a movie is a different animal, right? It's Ridley's movie.
I think the family was happier about your book rather than the movie.
I mean, for me personally, I feel like the language of cinema is going to be different than the language of a book, and so You know, as I said earlier, I worked with Roberto, the screenplay writer, and I felt that the changes that he made were in service of telling the arc of the story. You don't need to know that Marito had 3 cousins. The most sort of flamboyant cousin was really the one who ended up becoming sort of symbolic of all the cousins.
So the movie is also missing the history from Guccio Gucci, right? That I really enjoyed at the beginning of the book. That for me was the most interesting part because I didn't know about it. But of course, your book is so dense, so I couldn't keep.
Yeah, there's a lot. Maybe it should be a TV series.
A TV series, yes, exactly. So, okay, another question?
My opinion of the trials? Well, so the trial happened while I was in the process still of researching the history, so there was a lot going on, even though I wasn't working full time. And it took place over 5 months, from May to November. The judge met 3 days a week, and I was in court almost every day because I didn't want to miss a moment because there were so many twists and turns also in the trial, and so much of the personal family history came out in the trial. So a lot of what I was able to reconstruct in the book actually came from either the testimony or the documents in the trial. So it was really quite dramatic. And the courthouse in Milan is a massive fascist-era building. It takes up something like 3 city blocks. Kilometers of hallways and courtrooms. And you'll see there's a courtroom scene at the end, which I believe is shot in a Rome courtroom, so it's more ornate than the Milan courtroom. But the feeling that you get at the end with the judge looking down on you and the plaque, Giustizia per tutti in Latin, justice is for all, it's very authentic in terms of the feeling that it conveys.
Okay, so I think we are getting ready for the screening. Thank you very much, Sara. It's an honor to have you in the board of directors of the Italian Cultural Society. We are all very proud of you. And so enjoy the screening. And if you'd like to get information about the Italian Cultural Society and our classes, they are in the entrance. And if you want the book, also you can purchase it here and have Sara signing it. So enjoy.
And I'm just going to jump in and out. When I moved back from Italy in 2010, I was really missing Italy and the Italian language and the Italian culture. And when I met Francesca and got to know ICS, I felt like I had kind of come back home in a way. It's a great group and do great events, and she's fantastic. So.
Also, if you want to know about our upcoming events, you can leave your email address in the front, in the reception. Enjoy the evening. Thank you.